Thanks for joining us on News Center Maine Plus. I'm Brian Yacono. Nearing now the halfway mark of his 4-year term, Portland's Mayor Mark Dion remains focused on his two top priorities, affordability and public safety. Well, he sat down with News Center Maine's Phil Hirschkorn to talk about those issues and also the city's efforts to address the ongoing problem of homelessness.
Mayor Mark Dion, thanks for sitting down with us.
Thanks for having me.
So if I am looking at the calendar, it appears you're just about halfway through your 4-year term. And I'm wondering, just as a starter, what you think so far your biggest accomplishment has been and maybe what's your biggest frustration. And before you answer, let me remind viewers, you share power here in City Hall. There's the city manager, and while you chair the city council meetings, you're just one of 9 votes. So with that caveat, what's your answer?
Well, that's a pretty humble overture. Look, I think the thing I'm most proud of is we've been trying hard to maintain consensus about what to do with the homeless in terms of the city council. I think there was a sense that the council activities have been chaotic in the past and confrontational, and I hope I've been able to stabilize that. And a lot of that has to do with engaging counselors outside meeting schedules to maintain dialogue and conversation about what's important and what we're trying to accomplish. So it's a lot of backroom activity. I often say I'm Speaker of the House, not the governor, and the Speaker spends a lot of time just lobbying his colleagues around policy to see where consensus can be built.
So right out of the gate, you mentioned homelessness, which is the reason we wanted to sit down with you today. Would you say over the last 2 years, the problem of people sleeping on the streets or camping out has gotten better, worse, or is about the same?
It's gotten better insofar as I'm seeing the results of the post-shelter effort. I think part of the story that's missing is what becomes of individuals when they do get to the shelter. It's not a holding facility. It's a service that anticipates you're moving on to more permanent housing. And there's been a little over 550 people, 560 people that have been placed through that process. But nobody pays attention to that part because they're focused on the front end, the immediacy of what's on the sidewalk. I've been trying to pay attention to how effective are we after we take somebody into that system. And we're getting there. We could do better, but it's a challenging economic time, and you have to lobby landlords into taking a risk with us on clients that have had a pretty spotty history as a tenant or have other risks associated with them. So that's good work. Part of breaking up the encampments has led us to this whack-a-mole situation inside the city where you have individuals who resist any offer of service, who do their best to maintain their existence on sidewalks, parking lots, and vestibules of building. We're doing what we can there.
Well, one example of that might be Longfellow Square, where we've noticed in the past year it's become one of many places where homeless men tend to congregate during the day. Some of them seem to sleep on benches. And last Saturday, there was a stabbing where a homeless person allegedly stabbed somebody from Freeport. They didn't know each other, according to the police. Is that an example of what you're dealing with, or is that violent act, rare though it might be, in any way more of a wake-up call for what's happening?
Well, it shows the possibility of what could happen for someone who's left to fend for themselves on the street, who may or may not be suffering from persistent mental illness. It's not clear yet from the investigation if the suspect falls into that category or not, and I'll wait to hear from the chief when they've concluded their inquiry. I think what's more common is the litter, the human waste, the blocking of access to buildings by individuals who choose to camp out or sleep there. And part of the ambassador program that's been initiated by Portland Downtown District in partnership with the city has been to attend to some of the consequences of that behavior: cleanliness, litter, picking up biomedical waste and needles. We're doing what we can with the police. I'm hoping this year I can convince the legislative delegation that their protocol that kind of hinders police activity as related to crime involving homeless individuals which is not to say homelessness is a crime, but some of those individuals do engage in criminal conduct. And the legislature wants this social work first approach. That may work in some instances, but if it's constantly rebuffed and they do engage in behavior, I want police officers in the city to know that I support the expectation that we make arrests, and hopefully the court can mandate the treatment that they refuse to accept voluntarily.
You told me when I profiled you in 2023 when you were running for this office, when it came to this very issue, if someone's drowning, you said, I'm going to throw you a life preserver and we're not going to argue about what color it is or what kind of rope. You still feel that way?
Yes, I really do. But I think as mayor, I always have to remind myself, I can advance what I think is important for the city, but I have to get people to come along with that. So these 2 years have been about building that consensus about what we should do. I've met with the sheriff to try to deal with the issues as to why he can or cannot house the individuals that we will be arresting. The district attorney has her own challenges. She has her own priority. So I'm always looking for a way to understand that safety is first. I will be consistent about this. Great cities are safe cities. Great cities welcome people, but they respect the right that you should be able to experience your time in an urban center without harassment or threat of violent crime. So I've stayed on that road. The question is, when can I get people to agree to that? Recently, a counselor says, I think we need to step up the police. I said, well, thanks for getting a chair. Sit here next to me. I've been saying this for 2 years. So some would say that took a long time. I say, well, no, I'm more thankful that some of the counselors are coming to a conclusion about how important public safety is to the success and the working of a city.
You have also said before, in spite of your law enforcement background, or perhaps because of it, this is not a problem we can arrest our way out of. Yet at the same time, you seem to be saying you would hope that Portland police could be empowered to perhaps do more, take more aggressive actions when required?
Yes, I don't think we can just say we're simply arresting people. If arresting people means we're creating a new cycle of them being in jail, that's not necessarily victory from my point of view.
It's a revolving door.
It's a revolving door. But arrest could play a significant role in placing the issue before the judiciary to say, look, apply therapeutic justice, order an intervention in the social service arena or in the medical community that will help them deal with either their mental illness or their substance use disorder and compel them. I maintain that many individuals who are out there on the street right now, because of their addictive behavior or their illness, have surrendered, not intentionally, their ability to make a decision in their best interest. They've lost that. If you're willing to sleep on a sidewalk, that's not in your best interest. We need to intervene.
Even though not all of homeless people, despite the stereotype, even when choosing to sleep on the sidewalk, if they're truly capable of choosing, they're not all mentally ill or drug addicted, though many are.
Many have some manner of mental illness, but I wouldn't say they're the majority. And then the question, and that's one of the pieces I do agree with the district attorney, is we've adopted over a couple of decades the idea that the mentally ill are consumers. I think with proper medication and a successful participation in plan of care, they can assume that responsibility for themselves. What we're confronted here are people that are not in that space, and I think it's incumbent on us to exercise the mercy necessary to get them into a situation where they can be treated.
You said a few minutes ago that since you've been mayor, the city has helped 500 to 600 people.
600's high, but around 500.
Through the 2.5-year-old homeless services center and get placed with the city's help in some sort of housing situation. That's obviously an accomplishment that people haven't heard much about. The homeless services center, though, is nearly full every night. Last time I checked, which was yesterday, there were only 10 available beds out of, 215 or so, right, separate dorms for men and for women. Do we have enough bed space in temporary shelters like the main one and other shelters around the city? Obviously, there are other providers of shelter.
Why don't you go ask the mayors or city managers in the abutting communities how many beds they have available?
Not many.
They have none. And if you can see, it's an issue that frustrates me. The question is placed on Portland: can you continue or expand your city's work as a state service? And I've said long ago, the runway's getting short. Now, of course, if tonight I'm presented with 30 people that need shelter, we'll find a way. But I will be persistent in expressing my expectation, and I think the council shares this, for these abutting communities to do their fair share. I don't expect one of them to stand up a 200-plus shelter, but they could put up 10 beds or a half dozen. I mean, Brunswick has carved a path forward, that they have a recognition that it is their responsibility to their immediate neighbors to provide shelter. Other communities need to do that.
Lewiston finally has, I believe.
Yeah, they've moved in a good direction. I mean, Biddeford's making attempts, but there's a lot of communities that don't see this as their problem. Yet if I presented you the registry of the individuals in our shelter, the vast majority of them come from outside the city of Portland. So the question for those communities is, how long do you expect the taxpayers of Portland to pay for a burden that you should carry as well?
Which immediately leads me to the economic question. A lot of advocates say, well, the homelessness problem is a housing problem, an affordable housing problem. The rent's too high. There's chronic underemployment. Wages are stagnant. People can't afford a roof over their heads, so they sleep on the street. But maybe that's not the whole story either.
Maybe that's the wrong way to frame the story. I think what you described is a lot of issues that we're facing across the community by all its members. I believe that homelessness is a drug issue. It's addiction that put individuals in this space. The trouble with addiction that's manifested by needles is you've probably exhausted all your own resources getting there. It's still amazing that they find the cash resource to continue purchasing. That's the problem. I mean, I think some may be economic individuals, and we know that at the shelter, is that there's always a population that some manner of economic misfortune or family crisis place them in an unhoused category, but they get out quickly. They avail themselves of all the available services, and staff is able to get them back to mainstream life. Okay, so that's what a shelter is intended to do for many. But when you describe the population I'm referring to, we become like a de facto medical crisis unit, and we're trying to stabilize addictive behavior or chronic mental illness. Those are significant challenges to us, but it's not about housing. When I've gone out there, those individuals don't talk about, I lost my apartment. What we did lose as a community is once upon a time, and I'm old enough to remember that era, there was a lot of single-room occupancy buildings.
Boarding houses.
Boarding houses. I mean, they have a purpose, and somewhere along the line we kind of lifted our nose and raised our eyebrow that those had to exist in a community, and they've gone by the wayside. They no longer exist, but I can go down streets and remember where there were multiple units that provided that kind of housing service or platform. Those are much more affordable for low-end people in terms of economic scale, much like some of the buildings that Preble Street has put up. In the micro units, shared facilities were necessary. Those existed, those provided a key resource, and they're gone.
Do you believe in the housing first model that advocacy groups like Preble Street talk about? In other words, for our viewers that don't know what that means, it means essentially a roof over your head, someplace to live first, and then deal with the questions of getting and holding a job or treating your substance abuse.
I believe in conditional housing.
What does that mean?
You know, there's an assumption when we say housing first is that we give them a space and everything's okay. It's not okay. You've isolated them now, and if you haven't addressed their toxic behavior patterns, all you do is providing safe harbor for an overdose, okay, or more disruptive toxic behavior. I think there should be an intentional transition into those spaces where we have a case management plan in place. And I mean more than just sitting at the front desk saying we kind of monitor what comes in and out, but actually ensuring some participation in treatment cycles that will allow them to even take the next step into more traditional rental space.
So the condition of providing some sort of subsidized housing would be
The
confirmed participation.
Participation in the program. I'm just not, otherwise than that, what are we doing?
It's like
Warehousing.
welfare to work.
Yeah, welfare to work. I think,
Or I should say work requirements.
I think housing and health go hand in hand. We have to ensure that the space comes with a guarantee that they're going to take the steps necessary to rehabilitate their status.
Governor Mills and, again, some of the advocacy community sounded the alarm just last week about this new Trump administration policy change. Again, away from housing first, more for a treatment first model. They fear that 1,200 Mainers in support of housing that gets some federal subsidies are going to be, cast out onto the street. Do you share their concern? Are you following that issue, that change?
I've heard that. I haven't seen, what I've learned with Trump so far, there's a lot of thunder and lightning. It passes, and everybody stands around and say, what was that about? Because when he issues executive orders, they're not really clear. And then we've also learned, even if it were clear, what is it meant to do other than create chaos? And then months later, he withdraws it like he never did it anyway. Somebody else must have put that in the mail. So it's really hard to have a coherent plan against somebody who's incoherent and erratic.
All right, well, let's talk about something real that's happened in the state of Maine, which Governor Mills signed a couple years ago, which was some changes to our housing zoning laws throughout the state and asking cities and towns to comply. The goal was to have more density, not just have all these lots reserved for single-family homes, to have more accessory dwelling units, so on and so forth. Is that having an impact in Portland?
Well, we were ahead on that. Most of the things that state legislation addressed or directed municipalities to adopt were already present and solidified during the 7-year journey we took to recodify our zoning ordinances. So density, there's not a lot of buildable land left in Portland. Let's be realistic. If you don't see something on a parcel, it's probably not buildable according to code. We did away with the idea of reserving parcels in single unattached building neighborhoods, the tract home. Now you can build a 4-unit building on that parcel, so we've moved that way. I think we understand the importance of density, and we've tied that to our transportation corridors. So we want to have more walkable, human scale neighborhoods, even though dense, and to solicit business to participate in those village centers that this kind of development will create. So I think we're ahead of our peers there. Now the resistance they're experiencing, we're experiencing it on neighborhood level. Everybody agrees density is good. Nobody believes it should happen in their neighborhood.
Portland's own inclusionary housing ordinance, which was adopted by referendum before you became mayor, requires developers of these multi-unit buildings to set aside 25% of the units as so-called affordable. Again, what I believe that means, and our viewers may not know, is that it requires a cap on the rent pegged to the median income of the city, right? So a lot of developers say, well, that's too high. It used to be 10%. We could get it done at 10%, but now it's a real struggle to get the financing or investment to build these things that, in a way that's profitable, in a way we can move forward. Are you concerned about that, and is it having the negative impact that developers say it is?
Yes and yes. How's that?
I mean, it seems like there's not that much multi-unit housing being built right now that it is being built in other towns like Westbrook or up in Bath, not so much in Portland. Am I wrong about that? What do the numbers tell us?
The numbers tell us that prior to the IZ increase, the inclusionary zone percentage, there was more building going on. There's been a lot of permits approved since then. But my dad was a firefighter, but supplemented our family household income by being a carpenter. And that's when I was first exposed to the concept of, if it doesn't pencil out, I can't do the job. I mean, labor costs, material costs, the costs of accessing permits to allow you to do the work have been increasing. It's not that developers don't want to build certain types of housing. If it doesn't work out, they can't afford the cost of money to make it happen. So I would reduce the IZ zone as much as we could. I mean, the 5 to 10% range makes sense. I've also been pressing developers. We need to move away from 2-bedroom units to 3-bedroom units.
So families can have an apartment.
Look, I want to see kids running out of a building. If kids are not running out of a building, I'm not sure it adds to the true sense of community building that I like to see. I grew up in an apartment neighborhood in Lewiston, and we thought that was the norm. Our American dream was having a place to go and call home. Then the American dream says, well, you don't really have a home till you have 2-car garage and a long L ranch. Okay, I think the expectations of the city is people want to be here. Some people say they have a right to be here, and that we haven't kept up with that demand. And I think we need to let the market, to a certain extent, do the market and answer that call. I think we can make certain kinds of development attractive, family housing, townhouse housing, and we have to maintain a commitment to low income. But I see a lot of money come out of Maine housing, and Augusta specifically, elders and low income. That's why we have the Portland Housing Authority. There's been a lot of activity on their properties. I'm always concerned about your kids and my kids starting their family or having a long-term relationship where they want to develop a home, not just a place they live. Big difference. I lived in some apartments, but then I built a home, and that's where we raised our family. We need to build for that. And we need to sell a new idea to the public that the American dream does include multi-unit buildings. It's not shameful or somehow a low-end decision to live in an apartment building. I think it comes with a built-in community. So that's my judge. I went to Doherty Commons and did the open house, and there's going to be kids in that building. That's good for the school. It's good for kids that come from other kinds of neighborhoods. It creates economic diversity. It's all right to be in an apartment if it meets your needs.
The city council recently decided to impose fines on landlords who have long-term vacant storefronts in the city, such as the Congress Street corridor, escalating fines. The longer it's vacant, it could be thousands of dollars a year. What's the rationale behind that?
I oppose that. You might have to ask some of those who did. I think their proposition is it would incentivize a reduction in the cost of a lease in those buildings and therefore attract potential new tenants.
Is that why they're vacant? The rent's too high?
No, you see, now you're coming to my side of the debate. I don't think it has anything to do with the lease. And just a footnote on the lease, it doesn't recognize that some of those landlords had to enter into the financial market to get the money to have the building to do what they needed to do. And that financing contract may have included a recognition of what base rents would be in order to make the finance stream work. So we're assuming we can toy with that by having these fines. I think we do that at our peril. But the real issue is public safety. We're back to public safety.
Isn't the issue that the vacant storefronts have become a magnet for people to congregate or sleep in the vestibules?
Yes. It's what's occurring outside the buildings that are deterring someone from making the investment to realize their economic dream, whatever that business might be, in a particular geography. I mean, there's one of those buildings that has the lowest square foot cost of any commercial space on the peninsula, and it remains empty. And then I step out on the sidewalk, and I know why. It's the issues that we've already talked about. Those who refuse services, who have decided that they have a right to exist on a sidewalk or in a parking lot or in the entryway of your building.
So when you talk about this balance between personal liberty and public safety, I mean, just as an example, following what you just said, there's a city bus stop not far from here, across Monument Square, right outside Mechanics Hall, that by my observation is a shooting gallery of drug use on a daily basis. Why does the city tolerate that?
Well, the police do what they can. The other part, that's the busiest bus stop in the entire city. Did you know that?
For actual riders?
For actual riders.
Well, they're not waiting in the bus
No,
shelter.
what they're doing is they're taking refuge into Mechanics Hall's vestibule or away from that. I've met with Mechanic Hall's representatives to talk about that. We've reached out to Metro. There's one city councilor who's taken it up as an issue to see what we can do. That also was a recognized bus stop for the art, and it was a target right away for the ambassadors to try to clean it up. But it is, you'll see it's persistent, much like the recent removal of an encampment down on Lancaster Street area. We checked yesterday, they've probably moved about 75 feet. Looks like they want to start again.
This is the whack-a-mole problem
The
that
whack-a-mole
you
problem.
called.
So yeah, that bus stop is caught up in that. And it's unfortunate because the people that need shelter during the colder months, when they're making use of Metro, are probably pushed out at times by other individuals engaged in illicit conduct.
So you say the police are dealing with it. I mean, what, move along, folks?
Well,
Like
if you
how-
don't witness the injection, there's no crime. We can move them along. We might have probable cause to believe they're in possession, but if we shake them down or do what we call a stop and frisk, the backlash from certain segments of the community will be incredibly high. We might be willing to take those opportunities if I had confirmation, clear, convincing, utmost clarity from the district attorney that you'd welcome those cases. You know, so it kind of put the police in a place where they don't have very many options and they look ineffective to some in the community. Like, I'll get emails saying, Dion, why don't you do something about this? It's not that hard just to arrest them. Well, it is that hard, you know, and I know the law as a police officer, a sheriff, and as a lawyer, and if I had a legal airstrike that I could do, I would encourage it, but we don't. There's a lot of balancing that goes on here.
And people who refuse help, you can't force it upon them. I want to give you another example. There's a gentleman, you probably know about this, who was literally living on the median at the intersection of Marginal Way and Forest Avenue, a busy intersection here in Portland. He's since been moved to the sidewalk. Same man, one or two shopping carts, a lot of stuff. Clearly something's not right with this individual. He needs help. But he's allowed to stay there. What's the story behind that?
Well, is he committing a crime by being there? If we argue public camping, we can move him along, we can seize his belongings. It's tough. Take the instance of the medians. I find that personally frustrating. Yeah, I live out in Daring, and if you go to Forest Avenue and Riverside Street, people are panhandling on yellow stripes. There's not even a physical median there. There's a woman and man who do it in their wheelchairs, and I think it's a fatality waiting to happen.
Meaning they're going to get hit by a car?
Well, for sure, a car or commercial truck that has a high frequency of being out there. I think it's predictable, but right now it doesn't seem preventable. Years ago, the city tried to regulate that, and the ACLU took them all the way to the First Circuit Court of Appeals. And
It's a First Amendment issue, right?
oh yeah, and we lost.
Panhandling, yeah.
Yeah, we lost, and we were ordered to pay all the legal fees for the ACLU. I think it was like $175,000 at the time.
That would
Well,
pay for some housing.
that would pay for, yes, a couple units at today's prices. So I've read the case in great detail and reflected on it, and I'm working with Corporation Counsel. I hope that in '26, I can bring forward a proposal to try to deal with that. What I've learned as an attorney, when the court says no, the media focuses on the no. Most of the public says, oh, it's no, we lost. I like to read the footnotes. I like to read the whole case, because oftentimes in saying no, the court will outline, if these certain things were attended to, maybe the decision would have gone the other way. So that's what I've been paying attention to. That's what Corporation Counsel and I have been talking about. I would like to bring something forward to the council to try to manage at least certain intersections in the city. I think the first case tried to be a really broad sweep of the entire city. I think we need to focus on where is the highest risk of a potential accident exists and regulate for that.
When you ran for mayor, you stated that you hoped to amend the referendum process in the city of Portland. We've had a series of major public policies, one of which we talked about, the housing ordinance for affordable housing, which have been dictated to the city by referenda. And you and I have talked about this before, such as during your campaign, about how easy it is, the low signature threshold to get on the ballot, how the people who push the campaign more or less get to write or title the referendum, whether it's misleading or properly descriptive. And most of all, which I think concerns you, was when something passes by referendum in Portland, nobody, not you, the mayor, the city council, you can't touch it for, I believe, 5 years. You said it should be 18 months. What happened with your platform to reform that process?
Well, I got 4 years to try to do all these things. Listen, I think what's been, how can I put this? I have seen some counselors recognize that there was some bad referendum passed out there. Bad in the sense that it was written in isolation and it didn't consider its interplay with other city ordinances. I think they see that. I think they're also recognizing it's 5 years is too long to fix things. If you're part of the movement to bring the referendum, I think it's important for you to come to your own sense as to whether or not it's changing. I believe the environment might be correct to look at that.
I mean, you think you might have the vote soon to make the change?
I don't, you know.
And again, I'm not knocking direct democracy or whether the referendums are good or bad, but they are complicated economic issues.
They're complicated economic issues, and it's difficult to write good law. I wrote a law when I was in the legislature, all right? And the legal staff of the legislature liked it. They tweaked it a little bit. Long story short, I got it through. Months later, I'm representing a client on that very legal issue contained in the law. And I told the judge, well, I understand what it meant as a way to suggest to him to look favorably on our claim. He turned to me and said, Mr. Dion, I'll decide what it meant, not you. And that was important, is we have assumptions when we write law or write referendums that everyone will share our perspective of what it's supposed to do. And then it gets out into the world as a city ordinance, and it does things you didn't anticipate. Rent control is another place.
Is that working? That was passed by referendum.
It's not working. It works for some. It's not working for others. There's a huge debate about what does enforcement look like.
Why isn't it working? How is it not working?
Well, I think the proponents of rent control believe that if a landlord's in error, that there should be an economic punitive result. All right, pay huge fines. But the rent board is not a court. It accepts all sorts of evidence in making its decision. Then you go to court, and what's the court proposition? Ordinance exists for the purpose of compliance. Anything that will yield future compliance is satisfactory, and we're not here to punish. We're here to move people to a compliant state.
But setting aside the appeal or complaint process, my understanding of how it works is it more or less sets a cap on how much you can raise rent year over year based on what it was at a certain baseline year. Is that not helping people who want to live in Portland afford to live in Portland?
I enjoyed the way you dismissed the earlier argument.
Well, I'm not dismissing it, but that's the second part.
No,
the first part is rent cheaper as a result.
As an economic idea, I think it benefits the first wave of tenants. But after that, it has more adverse consequence than positive ones. Where it might achieve rent stability, it kills the capacity of the property owner to make the investments that will help them retain some margin of profit. I don't fault anybody for wanting to make money. It's almost landlords are not supposed to make any money under some rubric, but they can't invest in the building to maintain it. You know, oil goes up, the cost of replacing windows and doors and roofing materials goes up, and they don't get that margin.
In other words, if they can't raise the rent, they can't spend the money to renovate the very housing that people should live in.
Yeah, and we hear from tenants, it's not safe here, it's not clean, it's this, it's that. Listen, managing a property takes money, and you have to contribute to that. So it hurts landlords that way. I think there's this assumption that all these landlords are making huge amounts of profit. Yeah, they have a cash flow. That's the gross. They don't see the net after all the expenses are taken out. So I think there's room to consider modifications moving forward. But look, I understand where the tenants are coming from. They want to stay here. It seems expensive. Well, it's not seems, it is expensive. But if you remove the landlord's ability to maintain that property, in the end, they're going to say, you know, I'm out of this. We're going to sell it, we'll turn it into condos, and the odds are it's going to exclude more people than it helps.
So a lot of small business owners in Portland, particularly restaurant owners, all these great restaurants that we have in this city, have complained that they can't afford to pay the higher wages that's needed to help people to pay the rising rents in the city. You've heard these complaints. Now, at the same time, we've just passed another referendum to raise our minimum wage in the city of Portland to $20 an hour pretty much over the next couple of years, right? It'll go up to $18 in January and then $19 in another year and then $20 in 2027, January. What are your thoughts about the complaint that some business owners have, but also this decision by the city to once again have a major economic decision by referendum?
Those are not easy questions, and you marry them together. First of all, I think for in large part we should stay out of the wage business in terms of policy. It's a state issue. It shouldn't be municipality by municipality. It destabilizes, it's chaotic, it creates unfair competition between businesses of various municipalities. It's not the right way to go. I've been consistent about that.
So we shouldn't be $4 or $5 an hour higher than the state minimum wage, as a rule?
No, I think the state should decide what everybody's wages are. I mean, businesses, they need predictability and consistency from government, whether it's municipal or state, especially around labor issues. They don't plan every 6 months, they plan 5 years at a time. They need that in order to recognize how they're going to react in what's a pretty volatile business environment right now. It's not in our yard. And I think I was really frustrated this session is that we didn't decide this wage thing. We kind of just threw it out to the public. And that is a strategy because lots of voters vote top line. They like the title, okay, increase wages. Doesn't seem like I'm going to have to pay for that, am I?
We all want to make more money.
We all want to make more money. Why shouldn't I vote for that? I understand that perspective. It's totally legitimate. Please read paragraph 4 or 5 or 6. That's how we got caught up in mandating overtime wages is when the governor declared an emergency somewhere in the state, and we had to go back to the people and vote our way out of that conundrum. So it's the same thing here. I think, for the most part, the environment creates the wages that we're going to pay in the city of Portland. If you want staff, you have to be real, and you have to say, what do I have to pay in order to get people to want to work for me? And they may end up paying the same thing. But the difference is, let the business make that decision. The government shouldn't tinker with that. If the state wants to do it, at least it's applied across the entire state. But why Portland thinks we can do this math better than anybody, I don't know why.
Finally, and this is also a state municipality issue, property taxes. They've gone up significantly in Portland in recent years, certainly as home values have gone up and the city's done its systemic reevaluations. But what is your plan, if any, to propose or offer or promise property tax relief for people who can't afford, to own a home? what can be done about that? Of course, property taxes pay for the city's budget, right? Half of which goes to the public schools. So another complicated issue in our discussion about housing.
Yeah, that's why I'm paying attention to see all these governor candidates and what they're going to come up with. I think we need to figure out a way to decouple property assessment from tax rates in the sense that, and this is early thinking, but if it goes up too quickly, it should trigger some manner of cap on a community's tax rate so that they're not hurt. I mean, and I speak from personal experience, this year, I think my valuation went up 225,000, maybe 250. So it's not like I'm immune. People think if you're on the council, you're somewhat immune from the consequences they're facing. So I see that. 1 year it went up a little bit. This year it went from a $66 increase to a $1,200 increase. And for those of us who still have a capacity to make income, we shrug, we bite down, and we pay. But we have a lot of elders in this community and in many communities in Maine, and their ability to stay in their home is threatened, pure and simple. So I think that should be a #1 priority for the next government that comes in, where he or she and their teams can develop to address that.
But at the city level, you couldn't
At the
cap
city
it?
level, at the city level, here's what I've learned. Everybody wants more government. Everyone's shocked at the cost of government. Everyone wishes they could have A, B, and C, but then when they see the cost for that, it's discouraging to them. Can we put a cap on it? There's some work about rebates through an assessment process. But the preliminary thinking on the council is, well, we'll just tax those with more income, higher rates, and give it to others as a tax rebate. I'm not a big fan of that. I think it has to be a systemic fix for everyone. Again, there's always this underlying thing that if you made money, somehow you're a bad person or you're a bad business. You know, I don't believe in any of that. I think we need to do some structural work, but it's going to cost. I'll say what I used to say in Sheriff. If you don't want me to do something, I can do that. I don't like doing this chopping a little bit every year. It's like we have a pound of fat waiting in the refrigerator just to bring it out for that occasion. Okay, I chop that off. No, decide what you want us to do and decide what you want us not to do, and that's where you'll see some savings in the cost of government. But we're paying wages that are competitive like everyone else, and people expect more, so it's going to cost more. I don't lie about that. There's no magic wand until people decide we can do without certain things.
Mayor Mark Dion, thank you so much for your time.
Okay.